Hi, I'm Lance Lambert. Thanks for tuning into the Vintage Vehicle Show. We are in Parkland, Washington at the Harold E. LeMay Museum. The Vintage Vehicle Show has been on the air for 13 years. We've taped over 300 new episodes of the show, and the most popular show we ever taped was here at the Harold E. LeMay Museum. So we are back, and you're going to see some stuff that you didn't see before. The person that's going to help us do that, her last name is LeMay. Nancy LeMay, come on out here. How are you?
I am great.
And you are Mrs. Harold E. LeMay.
Right.
This is an incredible collection. It's well known worldwide. You are well known worldwide. We're going to see lots of great cars. You're going to show us some of your private stock, so to speak. But how did this all come about?
Well, the gentleman that was a very good friend of Harold's came to our living room one day, he and his wife, and said, "Harold, you got to buy a Model T, because I just bought one. We joined the Model T Club and we're touring and we're having more fun." Well, he didn't really buy a Model T, but he thought about it and he had a chance to, I believe his first car was a Model A. Mm-hmm. And it was restored in our restoration shop. And we did go on tours and we joined the Model A Club and the Model T Club, and we really did have a good time. But that's how it started. Why it went so crazy, I have no idea.
Over 2,600 cars, right?
Right.
Okay.
Well over that. And he had no idea how many he had, you know, that we had so many in the computer, but Harold loved to buy, he liked the stories, you know, like he loved to go out and talk to people, and then if he bought the car, he loved to bring it home. Almost all the cars he brought home himself. Many friends brought home with him, but he loved the chase. He loved it. And it just kept going.
Bigger and bigger. Well, we were here before. We did a pretty involved shoot here at the Marymount facility.
Right.
So tell us about, I know the museum is kind of spread out in different places, and that's
Right.
going to change soon.
Right.
But here at Marymount, this is the bulk of the collection?
No, this is not the bulk of the collection. It's a lot of the very nice cars. I still have, we have buildings all over the county full of cars. However, at my home, my residence, we have about 300. And they're very nice cars, they're very well displayed, and volunteers keep them that way. So, you know, this is my world. Well, this is how I live.
Yeah. Your volunteers are pretty famous. I know that's a job a lot of people like to get. And you're also famous for the meals that you feed them.
Oh yeah, we do feed.
Everybody says you got to see the cars and you got to have the meal.
Yeah.
Well, you talked about your private residence. Is there any possibility that we could maybe go take a look at that?
Sure, come on over to my world.
Let's go in her world. Beautiful facility, beautiful residence you have here. This is very, very nice. So how did this come about?
One building at a time. Mm-hmm. You know, this is my home. I live here year-round, and the buildings, you know, we would get so many cars, and then he'd build a building, because he always thought that you buy the car and then worry about where you put it. So we just built buildings on, and
more buildings and more buildings.
More buildings, mm-hmm. And then double-storied them. And
the cars that are here, they have come, and the stories about Harold are that he would take his flatbed or his tow truck or whatever and hit all parts of the country and come back with 2 cars or 10 cars or 40 cars. What inspired him? How did he know where to go? How did he sniff this stuff out?
Well, when he, I think, finally got serious about it, or whatever we would call that, I mean, he loved cars, vehicles. It didn't have to be a car. It could be a truck or a motorcycle or whatever. But when Harrah's, the auctions at Harrah's, when he died and they were split up so badly, it was such an awesome collection. That really got to him, and so I think it was that point that he actually tried to collect a variety of cars so that he would have a good America's Car Museum. He started the museum himself in '98, and a grandson was director then. And, so it was his goal to have a museum, and we're working diligently on that. So
right. Well,
it'll be great.
Harold passed away, what, a couple of years ago now?
No, actually in 2000.
2000, okay. And he laid the groundwork for the creation of the best automotive museum in the world. I know you have the land there by the Tacoma Dome, Tacoma,
Right,
Washington.
right.
And you're going to build this enormous, incomparable museum that
Right.
would be a world destination for everybody. And was that his dream from way back, or did at one point he went, I've got to do something a little extra special here?
Well, actually, he never thought about it until about '98. That's when we started talking museum, basically, and we thought, let's do a museum that can be filled with the cars. I mean, we have some very nice, very fancy cars, but we also have the ones that everybody drove every day, the Fords and the Chevys and Hudsons and Ramblers or whatever.
Well, you had to get those cars here, and I know Harold had flatbeds and had trailers, but he also had a tow truck that is absolutely gorgeous. Can we take a look at that?
Sure, let's do that.
All right. A 1956 GMC tow truck. This is pretty neat. So Harold had to, did he actually use this, or was it just a showpiece?
Well, when I married Harold in '63, this was the record. We have a tow, he had a tow company, we still do. But this was the truck he was driving. He called it Lucky 13. Lucky was his nickname, and 13 was his lucky number.
I understand in the interior of this there was a past injury to a member of the LeMay family and that would be Doug LeMay, correct?
Right.
Your son?
Yes.
And Doug, come on over here. So, Doug LeMay, thanks for having us here today. So I understand you left your mark on this, is that right?
Yes. Shortly after my mom and dad got married, he was driving, and I think we were at my grandma's house, and he pulled up because we were stopping on the way to get something and to see her, and he stopped, and I went forward, and there's a clock on the dash, and it hit me right there and cut me open. And
so that's why it says 3 o'clock. Right?
Yeah, 3 o'clock, yeah.
What was it like having the coolest car guy in the country for your dad?
It was neat. We did a lot of things. We'd go out in fields, and you cut trees down to get the car out, and you drag them home, and sometimes you didn't think it was so neat, but later it was okay.
I think the thing that impressed people the most about Harold is he was just such a regular guy.
Yeah.
I had the pleasure of meeting him at an auction where I foolishly tried to outbid him on a car that's now in your collection. And he had his bib overalls on, and he was really fun to talk to.
Yeah.
Well, tell us about this, some of the technical side of this.
Well, GMC, it was a 56 GMC. GMC, that in that years, they had Pontiac engines in them. And so that's a little unique. So it's got air over hydraulic brakes. It runs on propane, which was pretty unique at the time because he did that in like '62. It's got air operated controls for the winch and boom, whereas you can see the inside there. There's some buttons on the back window. You could actually raise and lower the car from inside the truck.
Wow.
So, and that was pretty unique at the time it was put together.
57 Rambler. I'm very, very partial to Ramblers. I've owned lots of them. I currently, my fun car right now is a 58 Rambler. This is a 57, and the thing that sticks out the most about it, besides it being such a dramatic color combination, is it is outfitted for the Great Race. Tell us about the Great Race.
Last year we had this car, we was in Pennsylvania, and the Great Race started in Pennsylvania. So my son, Doug, and a friend of ours who lives in Pennsylvania, John Cale, joined the Great Race and drove it all the way across country. Ended up in Tacoma last year. So it's not a race on time. It's a race on timed, like 7-8 stops per day, where you have to be right on time according to what their directions are. So you need a navigator, you need a driver.
So it's not the first person that gets from point A to point B,
No.
It's the person that gets there when they're supposed to be there.
Right, when they're supposed to be there. That's it.
Have you been on the Great Race?
No.
But Doug has been on it, correct?
Right.
Doug,
right.
Come tell us about the Great Race. What was that experience like?
Well, it's a very unique experience. It's like you mentioned before. It's not a speed race. It's a timed race. So you get your instructions 20 minutes ahead of time every morning. So you have no idea where you're going, other than you know where you're going to end up that night, but you know how you're going to get there until 20 minutes ahead of time. They hand you these instructions, and you just open. It's like 30 pages of instructions, and all it has is a bunch of arrows and speeds and maybe a few street signs, and you follow those, and if you do everything right, you end up where you're supposed to be on time.
We have another car over here that I'd like to drive in a race myself. Can we take a look at that?
Sure.
All right.
Okay.
So Doug, the museum and Nancy is full of lots of very old cars. This is an older car for sure, but if I wanted to get somewhere very quick in a race, I think this might be my first choice out of the collection. When Harold had his choice of driving whatever he wanted, was one day it was a 1906 Cadillac, and the next day it was a 67 Shelby, or 10 cars in one day. How did he choose what he was going to drive?
Well, most of the time he was driving something that he could go pick up a car in. So when he drove a car, it was usually in a parade. You know, that somebody, he didn't like doing that necessarily, but somebody would talk him into it, and you know, he'd drive usually a convertible of some kind.
He liked the convertibles the best, and if you see in his collection, in the older cars and the newer ones, almost always drove a convertible. But he, like Doug said, he'd rather drive the rollback and pick something up than take one of the cars out.
Nancy, this is a newer car compared to most of the cars in the collection, but you have a lot of older cars. Can we take a look at some of those?
Sure.
All right.
Let's go.
Nancy, over the 13 years of doing the show, I've had a few people comment that we call it vintage vehicle, but there aren't a lot of true, what some people consider vintage vehicles. These are truly vintage vehicles.
That's right.
Do these hold a real place in your heart, or?
Well, you know, they do, because, well, the good part of it is that they're older than I am. That's the good part. But they're beautiful, they're brass, you know, they're big vehicles. They were much higher off the ground, and yet they're all drivers. We don't drive them because we're on the second floor right now. But it's the era that a lot of people have forgotten, but the older people, you know, remember them. And it's good for children to see, you know, how the first vehicles were driven and what they looked like. It's just history.
What's your first automotive memory? Do you have a favorite car from when you were a kid, or some neat thing that happened in a car?
You know, my father, we were very poor, but we seemed to always have some vehicle that ran. They were always old. But we always went on Sunday drives or as such, and I can't particularly remember any of the vehicles, but I can remember the drives. I can remember stopping and get, you know, maybe bologna and bread and having a picnic somewhere. And so I have fond driving memories, not particularly any one car.
When we were kids, the trip was the event, not that,
Right,
yeah, not that you were going to the
exactly.
Grand Canyon, but you
Right.
got to ride in a car all day long. This was
Exactly.
didn't see all those roadside attractions, and hopefully the car made it there with that canvas bag full of water hanging off the front
Exactly.
bumper, and so a lot of things kind of get missed by some of the kids today, I think.
Well, everything's so fast.
Yeah, and then when they put television sets inside the,
Right.
you know, if they're watching the Vintage Vehicle Show, that's different. That's okay. But if they're
That's
watching
right.
anything
Anything
else,
else is no
it's like,
good.
look out the window. There's a whole world out there.
Exactly, you know. And we really didn't take long trips when I was young. We didn't have the money, but we'd go on little back roads, and you know, it was fun. We had a great time, and you visited people. You know, you stopped and visited.
Right, aunts and uncles and
Yes.
everybody. Is there one car here in the room that really it's your favorite here? When you come in the room, is there one you kind of give an extra pat or a wink to?
Well, I think the most awesome car we have here is the '06 Cadillac.
1906 Cadillac.
I think the 11 is, you know, a little maybe grander, but to think in '06 this, you know, ran, I just think it's pretty awesome. The other car is on the other side of the room. It's not a brass car at all. It's a Franklin that we bought at LeMay Collection.
And when you say brass, obviously we refer to that era that had a lot of brass accessories
Right,
on
it's
the
the
car.
brass accessories and you know, lights and horns and.
And at one time, this 1906 Cadillac was brand new. Somebody was a proud owner
Yes.
of this brand. Any of the viewers out there that just bought a brand new Cadillac, it's no different. You know,
Right.
your car is going to be 103 years old at some point. so.
Exactly.
A 1907 Pierce. It doesn't say Pierce Arrow, it says Pierce Great Arrow. So I thought these were all Pierce Arrows.
Well, it's my understanding that the Pierce family sold the company in '07. The new company named it Pierce Arrow.
So in 1908 it became Pierce Arrow?
1908 it became Pierce Arrow.
This car is so enormous. This is a giant car. Back that early 1907, they were probably still trying to decide what's the standard width for a road and width for tires on cars. And I wonder if they just sort of, let's just keep making them bigger until people won't buy them. I wonder who decided what size a car was going to be, because this is easily, you could put a couple of Model Ts in this.
Well, yes. And it's very tall. It's an extremely tall car. It also has a right-hand drive, and yet it's an American car, because they really didn't decide which sides they were going to have the steering wheels on until a later date. So I'm not sure whether you could order them either side or if each company just decided which side they were going to have their steering wheels on. But Harold bought it from an estate of a friend of his, Bert Labarette. And Bert and his wife, after Bert finished restoring this vehicle, they drove cross country to wherever those stickers are. As they drove, and I understand they went 60 miles an hour on the freeway, which might be interesting in that car.
This has a little of the chitty chitty bang bang charm to it.
It really does.
On a previous visit, you were nice enough to allow me to drive a 1914 Pierce Arrow limousine. That car was so big. And the impression I had while driving it is I felt I was in a big farm combine. I expected to see big blades flipping around somewhere. I mean, it was so big and you were up in the air so far, but it was an exciting drive.
Right. They're smooth. They're very smooth. The big old cars are usually a pretty good ride. Not always good on the steering because there's no power steering.
Yeah, you always thought.
Nor on the braking. Kind of a couple problems.
Yeah, minor ones. Well, speaking of smooth, you have a car over here that is very smooth and classy. Can we take a look at that?
Sure.
All right. This is elegance, it's class, it's sportiness. It's a 1930 Cadillac. What a gorgeous car this is.
Yes, this is. This is the last of the big glamorous cars. It's a V16 Cadillac. I just think the timing was a little bad because it was in 1930 they built this Cadillac.
Right.
And although they sold several of them, I think their timing was a little off. But it's a gorgeous riding. Drives well if you've got a city block to turn it around in, and stops fairly good, which is in old cars, that's a plus. But it is a beautiful automobile, and we do use it on displays quite often.
This beautiful automobile and all the rest of them, you say have a restoration facility here. Is that where many of these are brought back to new condition, or do you buy a lot of them already this way?
This one we bought this way. We do restore our own vehicles. We're restoring a car right now, as a matter of fact 3. We have our own shop with our own restoration people, but we also have a lot of volunteers that work in that shop. And it's such a plus for us because these people are very good. A lot of them are learning, so they do really well because they're very meticulous. And the camaraderie is wonderful. We have a good time. We really do.
If somebody wanted to get involved in that volunteerism here or the camaraderie, how would they go about it?
The museum has a website that you can check in on. We do need volunteers, particularly the day of the car show. We kind of semi-train them, and most of them, have been here for years. So
if somebody,
we have a great time.
If somebody wants to be a volunteer or attend the car show or both, the website that just mysteriously appeared right in front of us here.
Yes,
right
that
there.
one right there.
They can go to that website, and there's a phone number or there's contact information there, and they can find out more about visiting the collection here.
Everything they need to know is on that website.
Well, if you have some rags or something, I can help clean up here today.
Sure, good.
Okay, good.
We'll take care of you.
All right. Well, Nancy, I spent a good 15 minutes wiping this car off, so I think I should be able to use this for the weekend. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for taking us on a tour of your facility here, the private stock. This is like the fine wine cellar. Doug, thank you very much. The luckiest son in the world. And let's see, it's Saturday morning. I should have this back by probably late Sunday night. Is that okay?
Hey, fine.
Make sure it's clean when it comes back, too.
Well, maybe. All right, see you in a day or two.